Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell, and I am doing a recording on March 28th. Thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. You can follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, Substack, TikTok, Buy Me a Coffee, on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, GETTR, and X. All the links are in the description of this video to be able to follow me. You can also listen to my audio podcast on my website under Broadcast Radio, Apple Podcast, and Podomatic. So there's many modalities. There are many modalities for you to be able to consume the content that I create. Thank you for helping support the channel. If you would like to be a paid member, you can be a paid member to the Substack channel, the Patreon channel. You can also donate on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. With that said, let's go to the news. We're going to talk about the Houthis launching missiles at Israel for the first time since the Iranian war started. Most likely what this will end up being is an escalation in the region. The Houthis, which are in Yemen, could potentially block the Red Sea because there's that strait there. And if they do, then oil will go probably an additional $10. So now the question is what will the United States do in terms of securing that strait? This happened last night, and we don't know how it's going to affect the energy markets until Asia starts their trading at about 6 o'clock to about 8 o'clock p.m. We'll get a better idea of what's going to happen with the energy markets. Another announcement, I should be interviewing John Hogue on Sunday. Today is Saturday. All right. So energy markets won't even open up until tomorrow. So tomorrow night. So I keep on thinking today's Sunday. So John Hogue, I'll be interviewing on Sunday. So that will be at 10 p.m. Sunday night, New York time. So put that on your calendar if you want to listen to it live, and you can ask questions too. But today, the recording is on Saturday, March 28th. And we won't know the effects of this news until Sunday night, U.S. time, when the energy markets open up in Asia. All right, with that, let's play BBC News.
Movement in Yemen has attacked Israel for the first time since the start of the war on Iran. The Israeli military said that the missile had triggered sirens in and around the southern city of Beersheba, but there were no reports of casualties after the missile was intercepted. The group, which is backed by Tehran, had said that it would enter the conflict if attacks against Iran continued. Our correspondent James Waterhouse has the latest from Jerusalem.
Well, the Israelis are saying they detected the first missile launched by Houthi rebels south of here from Yemen. The Houthis are a proxy force of Iran. They're an ally of Iran, and they have threatened to get involved in this war if Israel, alongside the US, keep hitting sites in Iran. Now, typically, I mean, this missile detected, we understand, was intercepted. Typically, missiles launched from Yemen don't cause the Israelis too many problems, but what they have done in the past is target commercial ships in the Red Sea, which is also a vital shipping lane where oil and gas is transported, among other things. And so if that was to happen, that would worsen an already pretty desperate situation when it comes to global trade.
James Waterhouse in Jerusalem. Professor Lina Khatib is an associate fellow in the Middle East and North Africa program at Chatham House. She explains the significance of Israel saying it's intercepted a missile fired from Yemen.
This is pretty much the last proxy that Iran had not activated and now has finally activated. Hezbollah, which is the main one, has been involved in this war. Some of the militias backed by Iran in Iraq have been involved in this war. The Houthis were waiting for Iran to tell them when to intervene. And their intervention, in my view, shows that Iran is basically running out of pressure tools vis-a-vis the US and Israel's attacks.
Pakistan also saying that it's going to host talks on Monday with Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. How important is that group of countries in this process?
The countries involved, Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey, all have very good communication channels with the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which obviously is the decision maker in the war on the Iranian side. So they can play a very important interlocutor and negotiating role. And let's not forget that most likely this war is not going to be settled through negotiations at this stage. However, it is important to always have a negotiation channel open because most wars basically end that way further down the line. So it is good for those countries to be publicly announcing this, and also having Saudi Arabia there is important because Pakistan and Saudi Arabia have also agreed on a security arrangement between the two countries. So this places Pakistan well to be able to play this role.
What are you seeing in terms of potential new alignments that are not solely centred on the US relationship with the Middle East, but I'm thinking particularly about this deal of defence deal between Saudi Arabia and Ukraine?
Yes, what we have is a technology exchange, if we can call it that, between Ukraine and Saudi Arabia that has been chaperoned by the United States. This is the most direct link between the two theaters, Ukraine and the Middle East, because Ukraine has the capacity.
And this is why a lot of people, including myself, are saying that World War III started in 2022. And there are 3 theaters, potentially 4 theaters, that are emerging from this genesis of 2022. And that is, you have the European theater, you have the Middle Eastern theater, you have the Asian theater, and the South American theater.
Drones that it gained through its war, with Russia, with Russia's attacks on Ukraine. Ukraine had to develop its technology. And with Ukraine entering this conflict, we can look forward to hopefully a broader settlement, which involves Russia as well. I think we are seeing more and more countries come to be more aligned with the United States, and Russia, although many had expected it to perhaps jump to the rescue of Iran, has not actually done so because it does not want to antagonize the US. And the US is now bringing Ukraine into the picture, and the next move will be Russia's. And I expect that there's likely going to be an accommodation on part of Russia vis-a-vis the Ukrainian conflict.
Professor Lina Khatib from Chatham House. Fighting has continued across the region overnight. People in the Iranian capital, Tehran, say there have been more heavy airstrikes after Israel announced it was carrying out fresh attacks. At the same time, Iranian media say a US or Israeli attack hit a residential building in the northwestern city of Zanjan, killing 5 civilians. In a separate development, an Iranian missile has reportedly hit a military base in Saudi Arabia, injuring 12 American soldiers. Officials told the BBC's US news partner CBS that some troops were seriously hurt at the Prince Sultan Air Base. More than 300 service members have been wounded in the war with Iran so far, according to US Central Command. Most of them have reportedly now returned to duty. 13 US service members have been killed in the conflict. Our correspondent Katie Watson is in Doha with more on the strike on the base in Saudi Arabia.
Well, we know that at least 12 US soldiers were injured. We haven't got confirmation from the Pentagon, but it was an attack on an airbase, as well as the Saudi Ministry of Defense confirming that there was a ballistic missile intercepted. But that was just one of several attacks in the region overnight. In Abu Dhabi, they've confirmed 6 have been injured by debris falling near Khalifa Port after a missile that was intercepted. In Kuwait, there was a drone attack on the airport, and that led to significant damage for the radar systems. In Bahrain as well, there were several alerts for people to stay in place and stay safe overnight. So clearly, across the Gulf, there are still significant concerns about the continuation of the war. But of course, we've also heard from Yemen that the Houthis have confirmed that there was a barrage of missiles that they launched. And they have said that the operations will continue until aggression on all fronts ends. And that, of course, is the first time we've seen that since the war began.
And that, of course, means that it raises the prospect of an even wider conflict than we're already seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, the concern on the risks of that. What will that mean for the Red Sea shipping route? Of course, there's lots of discussion about the Strait of Hormuz, where a fifth of the oil gets moved through that particular waterway. What this now means in terms of an escalation? Will we see more coming from Yemen? Will there be, will we see any repercussions coming from the US? It's still, I guess, trying to process exactly what this barrage of missiles will mean and what goes now. But certainly here, I mean, it's been very quiet. People here, here in Qatar, a lot of people have already gone. People are trying to get back to some kind of normality, if that's even a word. But seeing these attacks across the Gulf every morning and learning exactly, where's been attacked and what that might mean, certainly is showing that this optimism coming from the US about a war ending in a matter of weeks is something that I think people would like to share, that optimism, but I'm not sure that realism, translates as the war ending anytime soon.
Why spend hours on complex video platforms? With the upgraded Canva video editor, we've made it easy to edit your soon-to-be viral videos.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
All right, what I want to do now is go to CNN, retired generals, break down Iran war strategy after week 4. But before we do that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the gels. I have structural nanosilver gels that will help to neutralize, help to improve the health of your skin as a daily skincare. Also, if you're not feeling well because of the cold season, or someone around you is not feeling well because of the cold season, you can apply this on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your ears, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. They'll stay active and neutralize for 5.5 hours. They're very high quality. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, you can also apply it to the wound, and it will help to heal it about 1/3 of the time quicker. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gels. They help to neutralize. Also, I have structural nanosilver toothpaste. Get a few tubes for your household. It has structural nanosilver. It'll help to neutralize, whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, help with the gum line health, reduce inflammation at the gum line, and neutralize, improve your oral hygiene. And when you improve your oral hygiene, you're helping your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. So it's really important to take this, use this every day. And if you're in the cold season, it's really important to use this because it's neutralizing. It has a structural nanosilver. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the best toothpaste that you can purchase. And structural nanosilver soaps. These will help with your pores and help to neutralize. I have in stock peppermint and also lemongrass. So get a few bars for your household and get the structural nanosilver. Great products that I offer. Use discount 5, all caps, discount 5. You get $5 off. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
I wanted to go through the four different military options the Pentagon is developing according to Axios. There's the invading or blockading of Park Island. There's the invading Larak, an island that helps Iran solidify control of the strait, seizing the strategic island of Abu Musa and two smaller islands that are near the western entrance to the strait, and blocking or seizing ships exporting Iranian oil on the eastern side of the strait. How are you viewing those options?
All four of those options are going to absolutely result in American casualties, not just wounded, but killed in action. Why do I say that? Anytime you put military on the ground at a fixed location, remember that Iran could absolutely strike any facility anywhere in the Middle East. And so the idea that it is degraded, their capabilities are degraded, is true. They still have substantial capability, as was mentioned by the previous reporter in Tel Aviv. So let's not mince words here. This would be an escalation of occupying Iranian soil, and it will result in the lives of Americans being lost, and of course, the sorrow that will be experienced by American military families as well.
So when you see these soldiers from the 82nd Airborne deploying, and these two Marine Expeditionary Units deployed to the region, can you imagine a scenario where they are not used?
Absolutely. I certainly hope that this is all about posturing. And I understand that because that happens through history so many times, is that you pre-position forces and you have the sense to be able to not exercise them. It's also something where, let's just say that if there were 6,500, 7,500 soldiers and Marines, that's a drop in the bucket. Whenever we went into Iraq, we had nearly 200,000. So this is completely absurd to think that a small number of airborne, which are very, very lightly armed, airborne soldiers, as well as, of course, Marines, could do anything other than, yes, they could take an island, but they will be absolutely targets. I was actually in the 82nd Airborne myself as a company commander a long time ago, back in 1979 when the Shah fell. We were on alert to go into Tehran to be able to seize the airport. Cooler heads prevailed, and they called off the mission because they knew that an airborne brigade dropping into the middle of tens of thousands of armed military, we would not have survived.
That's really, really fascinating and puts that into perspective. Allies of the U.S. in the Gulf are urging the administration against putting boots on the ground to occupy Park Island or to remove Iran's enriched uranium. That's what a senior Gulf official is telling CNN. They are worried that this would prolong the war, that it would result in casualties and high casualties, as you are pointing out here, and also that it would trigger Iran to retaliate against those countries there in the region, against their infrastructure, which is so key, the long-term effects of that. How much do you think that should factor in to what the U.S. is considering here?
It will absolutely result. Absolutely. I'm not a betting man, but this is a 100% certain bet that if we occupy any of those, Iran will attack our allies in the region. And they will probably start to attack power plants. And as I've said before on various outlets,
here's the problem with what CNN did. CNN looked for a retired major general to say something negative about Trump's operation in the Middle East. Find someone that will say something negative. What's the alternative, Major General? Let Iran end up having weapons of mass destruction? And then our optionality is radically diminished? No. You got to get engaged in this and kill them. Get rid of the IRGC and get rid of the theocratic regime. That is the answer. Now, does that mean that there's going to be casualties? Yeah, there's going to be casualties on our side. There's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be infrastructure that's going to be destroyed. But the thing is it's a lot better to do it now than to have to do it later. So what CNN did was they found a major general that's retired to say something bad about Trump.
To the region is if they were to attack the desalination water facilities in the Middle East, because power can be restored fairly quickly, so to speak, maybe weeks. Desalination facilities are extremely complex. There aren't very many of them. And if you go without water, the people cannot survive. That's just the way that it is. So it can get a hell of a lot worse than it is right now. And we need to have cooler heads prevail, the way the president has already said many times: declare victory, and then let's negotiate how we're going to reopen the straits for everybody with Iran, and then let's move out.
What this entire war has begun is based,
but hasn't solved the problem of weapons of mass destruction and the theocratic regime trying to annihilate the greater Satan and the lesser Satan. So the major general is wrong. It's wrong. Kicking the can down the road. 47 years of kicking the can down the road, and this is what we get. If we have killed them earlier, we wouldn't have had this problem.
On a miscalculation of the will to fight of the Iranian people. These people are being run, the IRGC is being run, they're essentially religious fanatics, okay? They're not fighting for Iran. They're fighting for Allah. They're fighting for Islam.
Right.
And that's a profound difference. And 200,000 committed fanatics are very, very difficult. And they are not going to be swayed by any kind of invasion, any kind of attack, any kind of shutdown.
So this is a brigadier general, retired. Brigadier general, retired. I haven't seen this video, but it seems like he's moving towards, well, because they're so fanatical, there's nothing that you can do. Let's see if he says that we have to go all in and destroy them. We have to win. Or is he going to just say, they're so fanatical, we have to put our tail between our legs and just run away? Because if we do that, we lost. They'll be emboldened. And the theocratic regime is going to use weapons of mass destruction. And I'm very concerned about biological weapons. More so than the nuclear, because the barriers of entry is a lot lower. And the ability to detect their operations in biologics, in biological warfare, is a lot harder as they're advancing the program. So let's see what another retired brigadier general has to say on CNN.
The profits that they're making from selling their oil, they don't care, because we are the great Satan and they're fighting against the great Satan. It's a holy war to them, and regime change will not result from any kind of a land incursion in sovereign Iran.
So if it's not going to result in any of that, do you see what the strategy could be moving forward for the U.S. to get out of this conflict?
What about solving the conflict?
I think that
get out.
The only possible scenario that can lead to success, I believe, is diplomacy.
No.
We are not going
to have to destroy the theocratic regime. He's wrong.
Sure, we're bombing them to smithereens, and sure, they're bad guys. We got it. But the problem is that you've got this committed enemy that we're fighting. Perhaps 20% of the country, that's probably 20 million people, support them strongly. Sure, there's a lot of people that want democracy and all that, but they don't have the power. The IRGC has the guns, they have the weapons, they have the power. And they have shown that they are capable of killing their own people. The CIA does an assessment on regime change. And one of the first questions they ask is, when they do this assessment, is the regime, is it capable of killing their people at an industrial level? Okay, they've already shown they can do that. If the answer to that question is yes, then it's not going to lead to regime change. And that's exactly what's going to happen. And we're going to put American lives at risk for essentially pushing the football down the road, but we're not going to get any closer to regime change.
based on what you have laid out, right, and your assessment of the IRGC, for example, the fact that the head of the IRGC's Navy, we learned yesterday, was killed. What is the impact, right, of that particular leader being taken out on the IRGC Navy, specifically because he was basically in charge, right, of this push to close the Strait of Hormuz and control it? If he's gone, does it actually change anything?
It doesn't change a thing, Erica. Someone else will step up. I mean, they still have profound asymmetric capabilities. They have mines. They have missiles. If we attack, invade Card, well, they'll have artillery that can fire at us. They have a naval fleet of perhaps 1,000 small speedboats, 1,000 miles of coastline in which to hide them. They've got all kinds of capabilities, cyber capabilities, etc. All those things are still going to be at their disposal, despite the fact that we've hit a lot of the military infrastructure. They've shown already that they have the capability to continue to fire missiles. And it only takes a couple, 3 a day to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. So we're in there's really no way out of this other than diplomacy, because we are not going to beat them militarily.
Really? Okay, we're not going to beat them militarily. Okay, so he's a retired brigadier general. So he spent a lot of time in the military, years, decades. He's got a wonderful pension plan. Chances are he's got a better pension plan than you do. All right? And guess what? He was part of the military apparatus in a leadership role to make sure that we win fucking wars. And our tax dollars paid for him for his pension, for his salary, for his training. Our tax dollars pays for all the military equipment. Win wars. That's what you're supposed to do. And this guy is saying that the only answer is diplomacy? Then why are we spending trillions of dollars in the military if you can't solve the problem? You can't get rid of a theocratic regime that wants to kill us, that wants to get weapons of mass destruction, chemical, biological, nuclear. Why are we paying for your pension? Why are we paying for failure? Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, help to soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. You'll be able to recover quicker after a workout. This will help with your cardiovascular health, your brain function, your immune system. By bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals, you're improving your other organ systems also and slowing down the aging process. This stacks really well with Boomer Boost, but you can take it separately. This is a month supply. Make sure you take this every day. It's important to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. This will also help with joint pain and joint health, because by reducing that inflammation, you're allowing the joint to heal. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This is extremely powerful supplement that you should be taking every day. But you got this brigadier general. He's going to tell you, we can't win a war. It's all going to be on the State Department now. But please make sure that you send your tax-paying dollars to his pension, where he did not pass on the torch to other military leaders to make sure that we win wars. But he wants that pension. He wants that pension. We are rewarding these generals for failure. Participation medals. They failed. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link's in the description of this video. And make sure you get the heirloom barley. Because guess what? You're going to be recovering quicker after your workout, so you can build up muscle, so you can fight the big bad wolf in the Middle East, aka Iran. Because this guy, Brigadier General, retired, is collecting a pension for failure.
and you see about the potential for ground operations, what's your sense of at least what they're preparing to give themselves the potential to do?
Well, I think first, the intent of bringing these 82nd Airborne paratroopers forward is to take the slack out of potential employment of ground forces. Obviously, the Marines, 2Us, are moving into the area of operations as well. Marines and infantry from the United States Army they do a multitude of tasks, but seizing terrain is certainly high on that list.
I mean, if this, let's say the president does this, and we don't know that he is going to, but if he does, can you explain to us what that would look like in the initial phase at least?
Well, what's coming in with the MEU is the rotary wing lift that would be necessary to, bring forces on Karg Island or potentially on the shore of Iran on the north side of the Strait of Hormuz, for instance. So they have the capability to move the force as the RMU comes in, and you've got the ground forces to do that. But you also have to bring in all the enablers. So the good thing is we have air supremacy. So we have dominance of the air, the ability to employ fires to support those forces as they come ashore, probably by a helicopter assault, and then to sustain them over time. Not that it's going to be easy. It's extremely high risk operation, but they have the capability and the enablers to support the force once it gets on the ground. But the likelihood of, them being able to do this uncontested is very unlikely.
Well, Iran is saying that there are no talks. Trump is saying that there are, and he said there's 15 points of agreement with Iran, including that Tehran commits to not having a nuclear weapon, and also this idea of enriched uranium that the U.S. would take possession of. So talk to us about that. Where is most of that held, and what are the challenges in securing that?
Yeah, so there are a lot of challenges to that, Brianna, and where most of it is held is basically in several places here. We have Natanz, which is one of the enrichment facilities. You have Fordo, another enrichment facility. And then the rest of them here, Tehran, Arak, Isfahan, those are all research facilities. So the theory is that a lot of that enriched uranium that we have is probably held in Isfahan. However, there is the distinct possibility that among those 970 or so pounds of enriched uranium that they have been dispersed, that those scuba tank-sized containers of the enriched uranium have been dispersed throughout at least some of these areas and perhaps in other areas throughout Iran. So that is a very difficult problem.
And the president over the weekend had threatened that he was going to start hitting Iran's energy sites, right? And then today he says, actually, 5-day moratorium while we're having these talks. But talk to us about these big sites and what the big targets would be.
So among the big targets that we see in this particular case are the Damavan combined cycle power plant, which produces about 2,868 megawatts of power. That's the biggest plant in Iran itself. Another one is the Shahid Salimi plant, 2,215 megawatts. And then the third one would be the Shahid Rajai plant, with about a little over 2,000 megawatts. So this is basically the group of plants that produce a large proportion of Iran's power. However, there are a lot of power plants out there, and these big three are not responsible for everything. There are about 50 or so plants that are major electrical producers. And then we can't forget about this thing right here. This is the Bushehr nuclear plant, which is right in this area right here. So that would be another place that if that were attacked, that would be a very dangerous thing for the rest of the Gulf and certainly for Iran itself.
And you can see this cycle happening if this starts to go, right? Because the IRGC has threatened that they would retaliate, specifically when it comes to Israel and also other regional countries and sites where the U.S. has a stake. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so this is what we've seen so far. So when you look at this, and this is a mix of strikes against Iran, as well as Iran strikes against Israel and the Gulf countries. So this is quite numerous. The concentration of strikes has so far been in the western part of Iran, the southern part of Iran, and of course around the capital, Tehran, right here. What would have to happen in a case like this is you would have to see a whole bunch of other strikes, potentially in this area right here on the Strait of Hormuz, because in this particular case, that is, of course, what is of greatest interest from an economic perspective. 20% of the oil flowing through this area, this is the area that would get a lot of attention if we were to restrike things. Plus, you have the command and control elements in all of these areas, but the real key to all of this is not only what they can do in terms of getting commerce through, but also in terms of getting rid of the missiles, getting rid of the missile launch sites. And a lot of those are right in this particular area right here.
There's Trump's insistence that the United States has won the war. Then there's the deployment of the 82nd Airborne. Is it all but certain that these troops will see combat, or is this symbolic in nature?
I certainly hope that it is symbolic and that it is posturing by the president. Sending in a airborne brigade, which is extremely lightly armed, and announcing it in advance is not something you should be doing.
Even for deterrence?
Even for deterrence. I was actually in the 82nd when the Shah fell in 1979. I was a company commander. And quite frankly, even though we were alone and unafraid, we knew that it was going to be a very difficult mission to actually capture the Tehran airport. And those airborne, that airborne brigade, this is not the proper use of them. This is how lightly they're armored.
Based on your experience, I'm curious, because this regime has remained pretty bullish. They don't seem to be shying away from the prospect, at least outwardly and vocally, of the possibility of ground troops in Iran. Why is it that the president will go down that route given that? Is Iran just posturing?
It's probably both sides are posturing. I think it's very important that those Marines that are already outside of the straits, they could be used hopefully to reinforce after hostilities end, reinforce the American bases. They could be there to restore order to the consulates and the embassies, which is their primary mission. I would certainly hope that they are not going to be used for any kind of a boots on the ground situation, because they will be a huge target by the Iranians.
Peter, the president says Iran has agreed to no nuclear weapons. Is that plausible?
I mean, it has to be.
Iran agreed to that in 2015 with the Obama nuclear.
We cannot let the Iranians have nuclear weapons, but we can't have them to have chemical weapons either. Amazing.
Not to enrich about 3.5%. Well, you need 90% for a nuclear weapon. It was Trump that pulled out of that deal. It's very ironic that the deal that he's hoping to get is basically the deal he pulled out of in 2018. It's very close to the deal that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner were negotiating on February 27th, the day before we went to war against Iran.
So given that, what would they actually need for that to be plausible to abandon nuclear ambitions?
Well, I mean, you have to have inspectors. You have to only enrich to, let's say, 3.5% or 1.5%. You can debate about the percentages, but I mean, there's a big difference between 1.5% and 90%, and that is something that inspectors can inspect, and that's something that they were basically.
The problem is they're at 60% already. I mean, Iran needs to fall. I mean, it just needs to fall. We have to win. We have to win. And so you have this other general, major general that that was airborne back in the day. Whoa. They're not designed to do that. We can't take airports, and we can't do. They used airborne during D-Day. I mean, I am so tired of these people asking for our tax-paying dollars for new weapons, training, all this stuff, and to support their pensions, only for them to get on CNN and say that they can't do the job. I mean, what the hell? Why are we spending all this money then? Either do the job, get it done, or you don't get the money. It's that simple.
Agreements between Witkoff and Kushner, they were getting very close to that. Basically used for civilian purposes, medical purposes, so that's the deal that we may be coming back to.
Interestingly enough, the source is telling CNN that Iran would prefer negotiating with the Vice President, J.D. Vance, than, say, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. Vance apparently is seen as more sympathetic about ending the war. What do you make of that?
Well, Vance said publicly in 2024, a year and a half ago, that the war would be a massive distraction and hugely expensive. Well, that turned out to be a pretty good prediction of what happened. So you know, I mean, and obviously he has presidential ambitions. He knows that, you know, I mean, it's a kind of tough one for him, you know, maybe to accept this poison chalice, because it, you know, it may not get solved very quickly. But clearly he's seen as more sympathetic. You know, Jared Kushner is well known. Netanyahu is a friend of the Kushner family, slept at the Kushner family residence back when he was visiting the United States. And so, you know, that history is well known. They see J.D. Vance as something who might be more sympathetic to that cause.
General, while the president continues to claim that there is victory, that the former Secretary of Defense, General Jim Mattis, who warns this, Iran right now, if we declared victory, they would now say they own the strait. You'd see a tax for every ship that goes through. We're in a tough spot. I can't identify a lot of options. Can you?
Right. And not only that, UAE and Saudi Arabia said it is unacceptable for Iran to be taxing the strait. We have to win here. We have to win. We don't have a choice. We have to win.
It is actually an act of negotiation with the Iranians. The Iranians can keep that strait closed at any time. It's something where they have the capability by missiles or drones to strike any ship that passes through there from anywhere in Iran. You don't have to just be in the mountains surrounding the strait to use a direct fire weapon. You can actually get a ship from anywhere. So it has to be something that is negotiated. And I certainly hope if they are doing it, it's one of those 15 points about how can we do this between the U.S. and Iran to ensure that those straits are opened up to commerce in the next few weeks.
Peter, the president insists that regime change has already happened and that he's dealing with a new group, the phrase he's using, willing to strike a deal. A group, I should mention, that gave the president a very big oil and gas related gift. We don't know the specifics of that. What is that all about, you think?
The gift, I mean, who the hell knows? It sounds like a bad tease for The Apprentice or something. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't mean anything. I mean, if the gift is that the Iranians basically control the strait, as the general points out, more or less at will, and that they can charge $2 million for every ship that goes through, which an Iranian parliamentarian just said is going to be the cost of entry. Well, doing some rough math, that's about $1 billion a week. That's a pretty big dollar gift to the Iranians from the rest of the world. So, you know, one thing I think it's worth pointing out, the new generation are all people who fought at the end of the Iran-Iraq war, which we, you know, sort of a trivial pursuit question in the United States at this point. But for these people, this is the main experience of their sort of teenage and early 20s life. 1 million people died. You know, they believed that God was on their side. They sent 15-year-old boys into minefields to clear them, believing that they would be martyred. That's the people that are now in charge. So it arguably worse than the people previously.
Well, would a ceasefire be a kind of gift to Iran in the sense of allowing them, General, to regroup, recalibrate, reassess, and all of that?
Well, absolutely. The military capabilities of Iran have been absolutely reduced. They still have the capability to wreak havoc in the Middle East. We have to understand that this has really not gotten as bad as it can get. If they were to choose to hit the power plants for our allies in that area, to include our U.S. bases, then we would be in terrible trouble. And even worse than that, if they chose to hit the desalination facilities for U.S. bases as well as the Middle East, that could actually cripple that entire area because they don't have any water in terms of rivers. They take it from the ocean.
So if the U.S. were to bow out now or to allow the status quo to then persist, you have said, Peter, that you fear a potential for history to repeat itself. How so?
Well, I mean, we have this sort of strategic narcissism where we say, you know, we're ending the war. Well, other people can have a vote here. Mm-hmm. We said we ended the war in Iraq in 2011. 3 years later, ISIS was marching almost at the gates of Baghdad. So, I mean, the Israelis have different strategic goals than we do. They want state collapse. We don't necessarily want that. And then other players in the region have their own goals. And of course, the Iranian regime, we may have something that's even worse, that is the sort of the next iteration. So I just think if we say the war is over, we've seen this movie before, it doesn't necessarily mean that the conflict is over.
Speaking of who has a say, I want to play for a second Secretary Hegseth at the Pentagon, who says that the Pentagon has a voice in the negotiations. Listen to this.
We see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs. You have a choice as we loiter over the top of Tehran, as the president talked about your future. The president has made it clear that you will not have a nuclear weapon.
We negotiate with bombs? That doesn't sound right.
Very few things the Secretary of Defense sound right. They're not logical, it's bantering. It's really reflecting his education and experience as a major in the DC National Guard. By the way, I was a member of the DC National Guard. I'm not trying to diminish those young majors that are there. But he does not have the experience, and the way that he talks does not reflect anything that's logical. Negotiating with bombs, what the heck does that mean?
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver drops. You can get it in cherry flavor, honey and lemon, and also in blueberry. You can get the lozenges, which are a little bit bigger than the drops, in Manuka honey and in orange splash vitamin C. Get a few bags for your household. The moment you have that throat irritation during the cold season or the allergy season, it's really important to take right away. Mitigate that problem. And because it has structural nanosilver, it's going to help to neutralize. Super important. Another important supplement to take is magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will help to boost up the immune system and help with brain function. And vitamin C and magnesium helps with immune system and brain function and your skin. You can stack them together or take them separately. It's up to you. But it's really important to take every day. Magnesium, many people, they're not taking enough magnesium to improve their brain function and their immune system. So please go to my store, get the vitamin C, magnesium and zinc. Use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video. All right, we're going to listen into Al Jazeera's take on the Houthis hitting or shooting missiles to Israel. Now, as of this recording, I want to mention that the S&P 500 closed on Friday. The S&P 500 closed at 6,368. So we broke the 6,450 support level. That's serious. All right. So the S&P 500 is probably going to go down even more. Maybe even approaching 6,000. Unless things get stabilized in the region. WTI oil futures are trading at $99.64 at the close. And natural gas is trading at 3.025. It was trading at 2.8. So we definitely have some issues here. And Bitcoin is trading at 66,761. Things don't stabilize. We're going to see oil above 100, and we're going to see the equity market approaching 6,000.
Leo says the war with Iran could end within weeks without the need for ground troops.
We're going to destroy their Navy, we're going to destroy their Air Force, and we are going to significantly destroy their missile launchers so they can never hide behind these things to get a nuclear weapon. We are achieving all those objectives. We are ahead of schedule on most of them, and we can achieve them without any ground troops, without any.
We're live in Dubai, Tehran, and Ramallah, but we're going to start in Yemen. Yusuf Mahdi is joining us now from Sana. So the Houthis, I understand, have just released that statement we were talking about. What else have they been saying?
Well, I spoke with a military expert who tells me that the Ansarullah Houthis' position in this war will consist of 3 phases. The first phase is to launch continuous attacks against Israeli military positions until Israel stops its military role in the attacks against Iran. That's the first phase. The second phase will consist of imposing a naval blockade on all Israeli-linked ships attempting to cross Bab el-Mandeb. And as you know, all imported goods into the port of Eilat goes through Bab el-Mandeb. In fact, 30% of Israel's trade and all imported goods cross Bab el-Mandeb and cross through to the Red Sea. Israel racked up a total of $80 million in debt because of the Ansar Allah Houthis military attacks from 2024 to 25. They also were effective in ultimately announcing the closure of the port of Eilat and also the port of Haifa, all because of the Ansar Allah Houthis military attacks against all Israeli-linked vessels and all Israeli-linked companies attempting to cross Bab el-Mandeb. The second phase, as I mentioned, is imposing a naval blockade on all Israeli maritime assets. The third phase will consist of attacking U.S. military bases if the U.S. gets involved. So if the U.S. decides to engage in military operations with Israel against Ansar Allah Houthi positions, against any attacks here in Yemen, then that's when the Yemeni group will begin targeting U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, and across the region.
Yusuf, thank you very much indeed. Yusuf Madri there joining us live from Sanaa. We're going to go to Nida Ibrahim in Ramallah. This is opening up, of course, a third front for Israel, putting additional pressure not only on the Israeli government, but also, of course, on the Israeli people who have been being targeted by attacks from Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Iran, and now from the Houthis in Yemen.
With the help of zero accounting software, I've got the right information at my fingertips. So now I can take my business anywhere. There's zero with the next.
This is an ad for Nintendo.
Oh, this is the life.
Yes, indeed. And these attacks from Iran and Hezbollah, for example, just since last night until this morning, have kept Israelis going to shelters at least 18 times as these ballistic missiles as well as drones were coming into different parts of Israel as a result of continuing Hezbollah and Iran pressure on Israelis. Now, another front. Yes, the Israeli army wants to show that it can and had intercepted the missile coming in from the Houthis fired into southern Israel. But at the same time, it's a public concern that needs to be addressed, specifically that we've been seeing how some interceptions fail, how some cluster munitions are able to cause a lot of damage, how sometimes the detection of these missiles becomes a bit late, so the Israelis do not have enough time to go to shelters and fortified places. That could also lead to casualties. At the same time, Israel wants to show
this is important. This is important to really think about because of the Houthis firing missiles towards Israel, because Israel's fighting Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Houthis could control the Strait of Bab al-Mandab Strait. That's at the neck of the Red Sea. So you have the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Bab al-Mandab. That potentially both of those could be closed. Well, the oil that's being diverted through Saudi Arabia and going into the Red Sea, that could be choke pointed at least one end of the Red Sea, right? They'd have to go to the north and not to the south. So that would increase shipping if they needed to ship to Asia. A lot of this oil that's being pumped in the Middle East is going to Asia. So both of these straits, if they're closed, is going to be a major problem, and it's going to raise the costs by at least $10 for Brent if it's closed. Now, about 12% of the global maritime trade passes through the choke point of Bab el-Mandab Strait. 12%. This is a significant problem. Now, I'm sure in the war plan that if the Houthis got involved, that there was going to be attack. The United States was going to attack Yemen. I'm sure that's going to happen. All right. But as we're now having two areas of theater in that region, we're going to be we are going to be diverting some of our attention. Instead of just on Iran, now we got to worry about the Houthis. How long this is going to last, who knows? But this is definitely going to affect oil markets. So things seem to be getting worse in the region, not better. Getting worse. And we don't know if the airborne or the Marines are going towards the islands. They may be going to attack Yemen.
Now it's a third front being added to the war. And if you talk to Israeli military officials, Israeli government officials, you would see that behind closed doors, they are interested in maintaining the pressure on Iran. As we've been reporting in the past few days, Israel has backtracked publicly on its remarks on the ability to crack and to topple the Iranian regime as a result of the continued attacks. But deep down, they want to keep attacking Iran. And any de-escalation does not serve these Israeli goals. They want to attack not just the regime, but as we've seen, also facilities inside Iran that belong to the state. They want to also hit strategic areas that could potentially drive the population to a popular revolt after the war ends. This is the key word that we've been hearing from many officials in the past few days. After the war, meaning that they are betting and hoping that they could continue with their maximum pressure on the regime, on the Iranian facilities, on the strategic assets of.
Okay, we seem to have lost our sound there from Nida in Ramallah. We're going to go to Tokyo Asadi, who's in Tehran for us. Tokyo, has there been any response from Iran to the statement that we've heard from the Houthis in Yemen?
Well, actually, so far, there's no official response from Tehran in that regard, but we can say with a considerable amount of certainty that the move is going to be welcomed here in Tehran. But speaking of the context, we have to keep in mind that over the past months and years, we hear from Tehran that they're saying that Houthis in Yemen are our close allies, but the system of decision-making and the courses of action that they take are quite independent, and they're doing their own decisions, they're doing their own actions in that regard. But it's still, speaking of the geopolitical context, of course, Iran is going to interpret it as a very significant development. Previously, a couple of weeks ago, I may say that we've got an official source telling Al Jazeera that there is a possibility for closure of another strategically important choke point without giving a name about which choke point that would be. But right now, after the leverage that Iran tries to practice when it comes to closure of the Strait of Hormuz to the adversaries, according to what we hear from Iranians, now there is another choke point, I would say second most important choke point in the region when it comes to oil and when it comes to energy markets and when it comes to, in a broader context, the global economy. And if that's the case, I mean, if Houthis end up in the closure of Bab el-Mandab, obviously there is going to be another leverage for Iran and its allies to be practiced in the middle of this ongoing airstrikes that Iran is facing. And on that, I would say we have been witnessing the continuation of these airstrikes over the few hours in the country.
So, I'm going to come back to you in a moment, but I want to bring in Zain Basrawi, our correspondent, who's in Dubai for us. What does this involvement by the Houthis mean for Gulf states, which have been on the sidelines of this?
Well, this is yet another example of what many Gulf states have been warning about since well before this war began, that the longer it goes on, once it begins, the longer it goes on, it will only become more expansive and more complex. And the Gulf states have gone up against the Houthis before, and this will certainly be something that will be raising the alarm. In 2014, Yemen's civil war began in 2015, The Saudi-led U.S. and Western-backed intervention into Yemen saw them embroiled in the civil war, in a fight they did not have to get into that lasted for years and cost Saudi Arabia, the UAE, a lot in terms of blood and treasure. They extricated themselves from that, but not without it exacting a cost. And the Houthis, a much weaker force, went up against a coalition of 8 or more, backed by the US, backed by the UK, backed by every major weapons manufacturer in the world. Airstrikes happening constantly. And they fought them to a stalemate. That conflict remains unresolved, but closed for now. There is very real reason to believe that Saudi Arabia will be taking this as a major alarm bell, not wanting to restart another conflict on its southern border. And we have seen what the Houthis have been capable of in the past in support of Gaza, saying in support of Palestinians. They have led attacks on commercial shipping lanes in the Red Sea, in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait to great effect. We've seen those images of helicopters landing on cargo vessels, commandeering them, of the Houthis blowing up oil tankers and cargo vessels in those waters. That's been going on for some time. Again, it abated, but it could restart again. And that's what this conflict, or the Houthis entering this conflict, it represents enormous risk, not just to the region, but to the global economy. Now we have to remind people that they have successfully launched missiles at Israel in the past. They've targeted the airport in Tel Aviv. They've targeted airports in Dubai and Abu Dhabi as well during the course of the civil war, of that Saudi-led intervention that I mentioned. Not to the scale that we've seen since Iran began retaliatory attacks on the GCC, but still of enormous concern that this conflict is expanding, of enormous concern to the GCC, that there is yet another paradigm shift in the security on the peninsula and in the region.
Zain, stick around for a second because I do want to come back to you in a couple of moments, but let me bring in Nida in Ramallah again. As we were describing before, we lost your sound earlier on, but we've got you back now. Israel being hit now on 3 fronts, from Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also from Yemen as well to the south. But also, of course, Israel still being hit by retaliatory strikes from Iran. What's been happening there?
Well, the Iranian-fired missiles have killed 1 person late on Friday as a result of these cluster munitions that continue to worry and disturb Israelis, as the ability to intercept them remains limited as they splinter across and go into areas that sometimes are far 1 kilometer or a few kilometers away from the initial site. That is adding strain on the Israeli aerial defense systems. And now with the Houthis entering the war, that could also add an additional strain on the war. Of course, this is when we're talking about the public and the way they're dealing with this war. But when we talk to Israeli military officials, when we hear what they've been saying to US officials or to Israeli media behind closed doors, they continue to endorse the war. They want to create a situation where there is an escalation to kind of sabotage what the US president has been talking about, which is an attempt to reach a deal with Iran to head towards a de-escalation. And I'm reading now, just in the past few minutes, some analysis by Israeli media who say that maybe the attack now and the decision for Yemen's Houthi group to join the war is as a result of the Israeli escalation to attack nuclear facilities inside Iran, which has been seen as an escalation despite the US attempts to de-escalate specifically in that region. When we talk about the US president extending the ban on, or the fact that the US decided not to hit any nuclear facilities or power plants inside Iran. So that is seen in Israel as a retaliation by Al Houthi group in an attempt to support the Iranian position and also put more pressure on the Americans and remind them of Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the fact that this could disrupt even more shipment coming into the region, specifically when it comes to Israel, but also when it comes to air flight carriers as well. So all of that is being weighed in Israel as another escalation. But again, as we've been saying, Israel does not hide that it's intending to continue striking Iran, and any escalation in the region serves that goal.
Nida Ibrahim there in Ramallah. Nida, thank you very much indeed.
All right, we're going to go to Fox Business. This is talking about bond agencies issuing dire warning for New York City finances because of Mamdani. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the clarity factor. This will get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks, and over time, you're going to improve the connections between your neurons. You're going to be able to think faster. You're going to be able to consolidate memory and retrieve that memory better. So please go to my store, get the clarity factor. It's a very powerful neurostat. Another very important supplement is to take Good Night formula each night. This will allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep a night. When you have deep sleep and those REM cycles, you'll be able to detoxify your central nervous system, be well rested in the morning, and consolidate memory. A lot of people don't realize that if you don't get good sleep regularly, you're increasing the chances of early onset of dementia, and you're speeding up your aging. So if you get better sleep, you slow down the aging process and help with your brain function. You can take these together each day. Take this at night, take this in the morning or in the mid-afternoon. And this is a great way to improve your brain function. Another supplement that's really important for your overall health is taking a good probiotic. You can get the VeggieCap version or the powdered version from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. By taking a good probiotic, you're going to bring down inflammation at the gut level, improve your immune system at the gut level, improve your metabolism. You're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. If you have a better gut, you're going to reduce allergies, because when you have leaky gut syndrome, allergies increase. In addition, when you have a better communication between your gut and your brain, and your gut and your liver, your body will perform better. You'll have better sleep. A lot of people don't realize your gut health actually affects your sleep. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. And a good gut health will also improve your skin. Make sure you use discount 5 on any order, all caps, discount, and the number 5. The link is in the description of this video. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Warning shot from New York City's new socialist mayor. Multiple credit agencies, including Fitch and Moody's, all sounding the alarm on Mamdani's $127 billion budget. Not a downgrade, not quite yet, but a very clear warning. Keep going down this road, and it's coming. His budget calls for raiding the city's rainy day fund and other savings over the next 2 years to pay for billions in new spending.
Now think about this.
Taylor, tell me about
Now think about this. You go and raid the rainy day fund when there's a rainy day. That's like during a major crisis like what we had in 9/11, or the financial crisis that we had, or a major recession. That's when you do it. But this is because of poor management. You don't raid the rainy day fund because of poor management, poor budgeting. New York City can't afford the social programs that Mamdani was promising. Everyone's been saying this. But the ultra liberals didn't pay attention. They thought they can get everything for free. And now, once you raid the rainy day fund, and it's gone, how are you going to replenish it? Your finances are terrible. In a relatively good time. Just imagine when there's a major recession. We're not in a major recession right now. But when we do, and those funds are already depleted, what's the city going to do? This is Mamdani, Napoleon the Pig from Animal Farm. The cost of Mamdani's agenda: affordable housing, $100 billion over 10 years, universal health care, $6 billion per year, free buses, $800 million per year, city-run Grocery stores, 60 million per year. Estimated first year total, $16.86 billion. Billion. The affordable housing is just 10 billion for 1 year because it's 100 billion over a 10-year period. This guy is going to run New York into the ground. Napoleon the Pig.
Bond aspect of this for people who don't quite understand what it means for a city's bond rating to potentially be downgraded. How is that bad news for people who have either bought bonds or people who live in a big city like New York?
It's really simple. If money is being borrowed through the bond market, the city is going to have to pay more in interest. And they're already out of control with their spending, so they're going to have to tax more to be able to pay the higher interest rate. And because of that, everything is going to increase in prices, and there's going to be inflation in New York.
Cycle, right? Because if your bond if you get a downgrade, the bond rating goes down, then in theory, the cost of borrowing goes up because I'm looking at you and instead of having an 800 credit score, you now have a 7 or a 6 or a 500 credit score. So I'm going to say, you know what? I'm not going to lend you money at 2 or 3%. I'll lend you money, but you have to pay me 4 or 5 or 6% interest because I'm not confident that you're going to pay me back in full. Effectively, that's sort of what's happening here is they're thinking about doing a downgrade. And this is now the third in 10 days. I mean, this is shocking. So the interesting thing, Brian has tried to jump me in my pop quizzes. So I come with the pop quiz.
The answer will probably be on the screen as well.
What's fascinating is much of the city's financial pressures that you talked about are due to rising costs. From, I don't know, education to housing vouchers. What do you think the city PHEPS is?
PEPS.
Yeah.
Public housing.
You're close. It's the City Fighting Homelessness and Eviction Prevention Supplement. Fine, I don't care, whatever, that's New York City. Here's the problem. That program is growing at 4% a month.
Wow.
Not a year, a month. Their projected total cost in the coming fiscal year, $2.6 billion. That's just one agency I happen to pluck out of thin air.
They're not even fighting homelessness. They're leaving them on the street.
The problem.
It's growing at 4%. Not only not fighting homelessness, we are paying per unhoused person $81,000 a year in New York. And so a lot of people ask that question, well, does that go right to the homeless people? Like, that'd be a pretty sweet gig if a social worker just came up to you and gave you a check for 81 grand. But that is not the case, is it, Jackie?
It is not the case. And he's just determined to drive this city into the ground.
That's crazy.
The bond aspect of this and the riskiness is a warning sign for everybody. But, you know, I was texting with someone yesterday who did not vote for Mamdani, but was, you know, just going on and on about like, woe is us living in the city. And I said, this is what he told you he was going to do. At least I can't sit here and say it was a bait and switch. He fooled us. He tricked us. He didn't. He told you he was going to do this and he was going to go after it. And now he is. So at least that part of me, bait and switch usually just like gets me a little more angry than I am about what's happening here right now. But I also have to believe, you know, cooler heads will prevail at some point. There's just not enough money to do it all. And Kathy Hochul begging the billionaires to come back. I have news for you, Kathy. They're not coming.
Is she your cooler head though?
No, she's not.
You could be your cooler head.
It has to have two heads right now because she's got one eye on the election that's coming up. She's running for re-election, and she's got another head looking at Mamdani because she was an early endorser. So she's literally fighting herself.
Wow. A house divided against itself cannot stand, Kennedy.
Well,
she
Shakespeare.
cannot stand. Okay, so yes, I think we talked about this the other day. There's for every 2 homeless people in New York, there's 1 person working on homelessness. We established that last week. Remember that? 2,000 people working in that department. There's 4,000 homeless. So that's how ineffective this city is. That like you can't solve it when you got half the number of people on the streets working on trying to solve this. Okay. Also, they're going to, the tax thing, I wanted to raise an issue that I didn't know about until today. Did you know that you can get fined for putting food in your garbage in New York City?
For the compost now. I'm a big compost. Yeah. I love the brown
You know what?
Love the brown bin.
I anticipated that there'd be a lot of composters on this set.
Oh, no, I don't do it. Big fan.
Well, some. I don't either. I didn't even know it was a law.
Oh, Minnesota, you don't compost?
I didn't even know.
Well, we
I thought you had your own personal compost bin.
No, we clean up plates in Minnesota. There's nothing left to compost. But I did not know, and he's like, Mamdani is now back to enforcing this compost.
Yeah.
He's gonna, like, he may not raise your income taxes right away, but he's gonna get you with 1,000 paper cuts. And it's gonna start with your banana peel. If
And
you
your
throw in
coffee
the garbage, they'll go after you. Like, they'll go after anybody.
They're gonna lower the speed limit to 2 miles per hour and then they're gonna take it
charge
anyone. Yeah, $17,000 per summons.
So I know how they're gonna solve their buying problem. They're gonna tax the heck out of people who for the smallest little things, like not cleaning your plate, Tom.
Yeah, until they're going up to tax.
Okay, but you live in California, you're from the East Coast.
Yeah.
You have been to this opera many, many times.
Yeah.
Why are these leftists surprised by the results? When you tax people and disincentivize them, why are they surprised that they leave?
Because they're insane. They keep on thinking that they're going to have a different result.
In your tax base with them.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, in California, they get away with it because you got palm trees and 65-degree weather 365 days a year. Here, what do they have to offer? And money goes where it's treated best. We see it going to Miami. We see the stock exchange going to Dallas. We see the billionaires leaving. And that's going to continue to happen until you get a 1970s scenario where bargains become big enough that money comes back in because the prices just got too low. So if this guy continues, it'll create opportunity, but it's going to be a lot of pain in the
Yeah, the opportunity is not in New York State. It is not in New Jersey. It is not in California.
That's right.
They're taxing people and giving them a good, swift goodbye.
Manually copy pasting from PDFs to Excel.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. This will help to control your cortisol levels and control your blood glucose levels. By doing that, you're improving your immune system and helping your cardiovascular system. You're bringing down inflammation. And not only are you helping with your immune system and your cardiovascular system, you're also helping with brain function because you're bringing down that stress that is surrounding those neurons. If you have high blood glucose levels, that's bad for your brain, all right? Because it's causing inflammation, but it's also, over time, causing poor blood flow to the brain. Elevated cortisol levels chronically destroy tissue, causes major problems. And elevated cortisol levels is going to do damage to the neural network that you have. So to improve your brain function, to improve your brain health, to improve your cardiovascular health, and to improve your immune system, take ashwagandha root. Now, you can stack it with ashwagandha root, the lignans. You can take them together or you can take them separately. It's up to you. Lignans will also help with the immune system and your endocrine system, your cardiovascular system, and brain function. It brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. There is a synergistic benefit with taking lignans and ashwagandha root and taking turmeric. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the lignans, get the ashwagandha root, get the turmeric. Use discount 5 and save some money. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is super important to take every day. It's a gene expression cofactor, so your cells perform properly. It helps to get rid of cells that need to go into apoptosis if they're infected. Vitamin D3 also helps with cardiovascular health and helps with bone density. So please go to my store and get the vitamin D3. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Let's listen into some more Mamdani.
Earlier this week, John Katzimatidis sat with New York City's Mayor Mamdani for a closed-door meeting. Now, the two have not been particularly friendly. John Katzimatidis joins me now here on the set in New York. You don't care for his policies. Did you tell him that?
Well, we have a lot of disagreements, and he knows that. The one good news, and I got to give some good news. The good news is he's a very smart guy. He went to Bronx Science High School. You need 150 IQ to get there, and he's 34 years old. How many mistakes did we make when we were 34 years old?
Wait a minute, there's a difference between mistakes that I made when I was 34 years old and mistakes of policy that are ruining New York City.
Absolutely correct. And you know what I'm praying for? That he's going to learn from the gray-haired people.
He's an ideologue. He's a socialist.
Let's hope he changes. He's already went backwards. He went backwards on two things already. He went backwards on the property taxes. He's not asking for the crazy numbers on the property taxes, and he realizes that he's under focus by Moody's, by S&P, and that the whole thing could blow up. And he's smart enough to realize. And we had a good discussion. And I was with President Trump yesterday. And
this is a rich guy. No,
and
this guy
it was very interesting.
This guy owns major grocery stores in New York City. All right, this guy is selling out. He's trying to make amends with Mamdani so he doesn't get hurt as much. No, the thing is that people need to push back on communism. People need to push back on individuals that are trying to take away your property. This is an issue about the Enlightenment versus individuals that are antithetical to the Enlightenment. This is about life, liberty, and property. This is about constitutional republic. Not some wishy-washy billionaire saying that, well, Mamdani's going to learn and he'll be okay. Right? No. He's wrong. This guy's wrong. This guy's wrong. Mamdani is going to destroy New York City.
I pray. One of the things that our discussions, I ran for mayor in 2013, and I wanted the World's Fair of 2015. They'll bring in a zillion tourists into New York and create a new New York. And he was very interested in that. Okay.
Bullshit. And what it was is that Mamdani knows how to win you over. He's got that smile. He knows how to just win you over. But the thing is the guy's a snake. He's a snake. Don't trust that fucker. Unbelievable. Let's listen to Shamir Kanish on CNN.
No end in sight. I'm Michael Smirkanish in the Philly burbs. We're now 4 weeks into this war with Iran, and in the last 24 hours, it has expanded again. For the first time since the war began, Iran-backed Houthi forces in Yemen have fired a missile toward Israel, opening a new front in the conflict. At the same time, at least 10 U.S. service members were wounded in an Iranian attack on a base in Saudi Arabia. And back here at home, markets are reacting in real time, the Dow falling again, down nearly 800 points in the latest session as oil prices continue to climb. Meanwhile, the U.S. military presence in the region is growing. More than 1,000 U.S. soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division are preparing to deploy to the Middle East, adding to 2 Marine Expeditionary Units now deploying or repositioning to the region, bringing thousands of Marines and sailors. Those moves suggest the Pentagon's contemplation of using ground troops in Iran. But just yesterday, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said there'd be no need to go beyond the airstrikes.
And we can achieve all of our objectives with our ground troops, but we are always going to be prepared to give the president maximum optionality, maximum opportunity to adjust to contingencies should they emerge.
So on one hand, the administration building military capacity in the region, on the other, insisting it does not need to put U.S. troops on the ground. And that gets to the bigger question here because the timeline of this war keeps shifting. President Trump has repeatedly set deadlines for Iran to change course and then move them. The first deadline that he imposed was for 7:44 p.m. Eastern last Monday night for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz,
or face U.S. strikes on its energy infrastructure. But by Monday morning, before the markets opened, he backed off that deadline and put 5 days on the clock, causing oil prices to slide and stocks to rise. And then on Thursday, just minutes after the markets closed, following one of the worst days Wall Street has seen since the war began, President Trump announced his latest extension. He's done this before. Remember, back on February 19, he issued a verbal ultimatum to Iran during the inaugural meeting of the Board of Peace. He said the world would find out if a, quote, meaningful deal was possible within probably 10 days. That set an informal deadline of March the 1st, but the U.S. and Israel struck one day prior on February 28. This is nothing new for President Trump, setting deadlines, then moving them, sometimes acting earlier, sometimes later, but rarely on the timeline that he first lays out. So set a reminder for April 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern, or not. You can call it incoherence or strategic ambiguity. The man marches to his own beat. Surely the Iranians get that by now. I want to know what you think. Go to my website at smerconish.com. Answer today's poll question. Is President Trump bluffing with ground troops? Joining now.
I don't think President Trump is bluffing. I think he's warning. And that the question is how many ground troops is he going to use? Is he only going to use the Marines and the airborne? Or will there be a larger ground force that's mechanized? I don't know. I mean, anything can happen. Now, supposedly, the extra 10,000 troops that people were talking about, I think the Pentagon was denying. But we'll see what happens. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the cleanse, which is 30 parts per million, or the max 35, which is 35 parts per million, or max 14, that's 14 parts per million. Take a teaspoon a day, every day, and that will help to boost up your immune system. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. And then once everything's all clear, then go back to your maintenance dose of a teaspoon a day. I've been doing this for 6 years. It's really important. Take a teaspoon a day every day. But if you're not feeling well or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two prophylactically. All right? That's really important. Now, what this will do is improve your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. Super important. That will help to boost up your immune system. And when you're boosting up your immune system, you're slowing down the aging process. And again, it's neutralizing. It's neutralizing. It's what you need, especially during the cold season. Now, olive leaf extract. This will help to boost up your immune system and also help with your cardiovascular system. This brings down inflammation and helps to control your lipid profile. So please go to my store and take the olive leaf extract every day. Super important. It's a great supplement. It's dual purpose. Make sure you use discount 5. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
And senior military analyst, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, Admiral James Stavridis. Admiral, good to see you. We're 4 weeks in now. Yemen's Houthis struck Israel for the first time since the war began. 10 Americans just injured at a Saudi base. More troops headed to the Middle East. The market's down. It's feeling like escalation, despite the president's desire to limit it to 4 to 6 weeks. Your thoughts?
He can still limit it to 4 to 6 weeks, but the chances of doing so are getting harder and harder. I think the Houthis starting to strike, if you will, that's going to become the Western front of this war. That's another significant choke point because it controls the Suez Canal. So if you put Suez Canal closed alongside Strait of Hormuz closed, you've got an enormous gun pointed at the head of the global economy. So extremely worrisome. To the question of, is President Trump bluffing or not? Are ground troops inevitable or not? I think the point to be made is that the chances of using them, the option to use them that Secretary Rubio is talking about, is increasing. Is it inevitable that he'll use them? No. Is he bluffing? I don't think so. If we know one thing about President Trump, it's that he's unpredictable. So if I'm in Tehran, I'm concerned as I watch the level of ground force increase moving toward and in the region.
There's a perception, I think, in the media that we're putting tremendous troop concentrations in the Middle East. I read something online from a guy who writes provocatively, admittedly. His name is Ken Klipperstein. Just one quote. If you squint, an invasion seems inevitable, but look closer at the actual state of each force being sighted, and a very different picture emerges. Your reaction?
It's not inevitable, obviously. Again, we know President Trump is unpredictable. He's also impatient. And ultimately, will he use those troops if he decides to? I think he will. I don't think it's a good idea from everything I see right now. But the point for Tehran is not to try and assess, is it inevitable or not? Is it possible? And so I think that troop increase that you're seeing is extremely significant. Inevitable, no. Possible, yes. More likely than it was 3 weeks ago, yes.
You wrote for Bloomberg this week and focused on Karg Island. What's the value to the United States if we can control Karg Island?
Quite simply, we can strangle the Iranian economy. 90% of their oil transships through that kind of 7 square mile patch in the northern reach of the Persian Gulf. So if you can control it, you can inevitably throttle the Iranian economy. That's a good thing. The question I think the Pentagon is wrestling with and trying to give the president the right set of options is, do you have to actually seize it and hold it? That's a significant military challenge, frankly. Or should you blockade it? Or could you go in and simply destroy it? You really have all three of those options. Which is the best is something the Pentagon's wrestling with and the president will decide soon.
You are a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Here's something that the president said via Truth Social this week relative to NATO. NATO nations have done absolutely nothing to help with the lunatic nation, now military decimated, of Iran. The USA needs nothing from NATO, but never forget this very important point in time, President Donald J. Trump. If a NATO member initiates an attack, Admiral, and then draws return fire, is Article 5 kicking in?
It is if...
How's biz, Ash? Great, especially with the help of zero accounting software. I can keep my cash flow flowing by giving customers more ways to pay.
My name is Nikhil Navala. We're here in Route 38 in South Walton. Guests that want to have a really beautiful dining experience.
It is if the initial attack is based on imminent threat, hostilities that nation believes are about to break out, which is the narrative the administration has used here. Then it would have to go to the North Atlantic Council. All of the NATO countries come together and evaluate it. And if there's a collective decision that the initial round of strikes were done preemptively in the face of a standing threat, then I think there's a legal basis. I want to make a point about NATO that's important for people to remember. It is this. After 9/11, NATO responded. European NATO responded. They sent 50,000 troops ultimately to Afghanistan. They were under my command for 4 years. Hundreds of them died there. NATO has stood and delivered for the United States. I think in this crisis, you'll see them come at some point, perhaps from the sea, in order to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
What can our allies do? Not NATO, our European allies, shy of NATO's full participation. What can the allies do relative to Iran?
Quite a bit. And in particular, two things I draw a line under. One are the mine-sweeping capabilities. Minesweepers, mine hunters. The Europeans are very good at this. Why? Because they have enclosed seas they have to deal with, Baltic Sea and the Mediterranean. There are standing NATO mine countermeasure groups that could be brought into this to help clear the strait. And then secondly, Michael, NATO maintains standing maritime forces. These are guided missile frigates, guided missile destroyers. They're an international force representing all of the nations of NATO. Those could also be brought in. It could be done under the NATO flag if it went through the process I described, or it could be done individually by the European nations. I think ultimately the Europeans will decide to participate in a strait clearing operation. We need their help.
Admiral James Stavridis, a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. We appreciate you, Admiral. Thank you.
You bet.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas. You'll be able to absorb your nutrients easier. This also has bromelain that helps to break up clots, and the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. That's really important during the cold season. It's really important to take digestive enzyme complex if you want to improve your pancreatic health. It's really important. And if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll also benefit from digestive enzyme complex because it will help to break up your pre or post-workout fuel source. So please go to my store and get the digestive enzyme complex. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. Link is in the description of this video.
New York Times, White House, and national security correspondent David Sanger has covered 5 U.S. presidents. He's also CNN's political and national security analyst. And his best-selling book, New Cold Wars, comes out in paperback on April 7. David joins me now. David, simple question, complex answer, I'm sure. Why hasn't Iran capitulated?
Well, Michael, I think the main reason is right now the Iranians think they're winning just by surviving, right? I mean, we've had 4 weeks as of today of attack on Iran by the most powerful force that the world has ever seen, the U.S. military. And their regime fundamentally still stands with different leaders and much of their leadership killed, much of their missile capability down. But just yesterday, as you indicated at the opening, they managed to do a strike on Saudi Arabia, get through air defenses, wipe out 2 or 3, we're still trying to figure it out, major American aircraft, and injure 10 to a dozen Americans who we hope and pray will be okay. And that's pretty remarkable 4 weeks in. But I think both sides are living in something of a sense of unreality here. I don't think the Iranians understand how long the U.S. staying power could be, or the possibilities if they take Karg Island, as you were discussing with Admiral Stavridis and so forth. And I don't think that the U.S. understands that it would take a much larger effort in order to actually change the government of 92 million people and bring about that revolution that the president talked about on day 1 and hasn't mentioned much since.
You and I have spoken previously about the precision with which the U.S. military has operated. They've been able to hit their targets. Does that make it more or less likely that Iran is willing to relinquish its nuclear stockpile?
It's a really interesting question because so far the U.S. has not gone after that nuclear stockpile. Yesterday, Friday, we actually saw the Israelis begin to strike some nuclear targets, not the one where the uranium is buried deep underground, the one that we're most concerned about. But they have begun to take out other parts of the nuclear infrastructure. I think the Iranians have to consider the possibility the longer this goes on, the more likely it is they're going to lose that entire stockpile. The question is, can there be a negotiation led, it seems, by Vice President Vance, if this could come together, in which the Iranians would give up that stockpile voluntarily? Either all of it or enough of it that the U.S. would know they wouldn't have enough around for one bomb. Remember, that's what happened in 2015, in the agreement with the Obama administration. You may like that agreement. You may think it's full of loopholes. It is full of loopholes. But at the end of the day, the Iranians agreed to give away 97% of all of the nuclear material they had. And if we could win an agreement like that, I'd say take it.
In my prior segment, I think that the chyron on the screen said incoherence or strategic ambiguity. From the perspective of the Iranians, they have no idea what they're going to get from President Trump relative to these deadlines, on again, off again, and so forth. It puts them in a precarious position of not being able to, and we try and read the tea leaves here of our president, but from their standpoint in war, they have no idea what he'll do next.
They don't, and that certainly plays to President Trump's advantage, and I think he views this clearly as great strategic ambiguity. But I think the Iranians sense something else, that in the changing objectives that the president has articulated, starting with regime change, then it's not regime change, starting with degrading their missile capability and their military capability, and then saying the other day that they're desperate for a deal of some kind, which he seems willing to negotiate. I think they believe they have some more time and time on their side, that the more the markets decline, that the closer you get to the midterm elections, that the more painful this seems for the United States, that the president's interest in getting to that complete victory that he was talking about 2 weeks ago is probably going to diminish. Remember, it was March 7th, now 3 weeks ago, that the president declared, we've already won. And, here we are about to go into April.
David Sanger, thank you as always for your contribution. And what are your thoughts at home? Hit me up on Truth Social. Hit me up on Truth Social on X.
The clock is definitely ticking for Donald Trump to, quote, win the war and open up the strait and have a regime that's overthrown. Now, some people are saying maybe the regime, we could withdraw and do some behind the scenes operations for overthrow, and there's a regime change that takes about a year. Now, that's also another option that Trump may do. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. This will help with your cardiovascular health. You should be taking this every day. Super important. Brings down inflammation and helps with your lipid profile. Super important to take. Cardiovascular health is a big problem in the United States. There are many people that have cardiovascular disease, and not enough people are eating properly, taking the right supplements, and improving their cardiovascular fitness through exercise. And because of that, well, we have lots of people dying from cardiovascular events. So please go to my store, get the omega-3, improve your cardiovascular health. Myotrol. Myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain muscle. For males or for females that are 40 years of age or older, you're atrophying. It's harder to build muscle. This will help you to prevent atrophy, muscle atrophy. So please go to my store, get the Myotrol, do some resistance training, build muscle, maintain it. This will also help the health of your mitochondria, so you have more energy. And Myotrol can be used for athletes, younger or older, to help improve their strength for their sport. So please go to my store and get the Myotrol. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All righty. Let's listen to Times. We haven't listened to Times News in a while.
Hitting this base and specifically hitting refueler aircraft shows the level of precision that Iran can strike with sometimes. It was a choice to hit these aircraft. It's something that's going to inhibit basically the entire air campaign, U.S. and Israeli air campaign, the more of these that you destroy. But you have to understand, if they can hit these planes on the tarmac, they can also hit the barracks, where we might be sending thousands of troops to stay in.
The US government still seems optimistic about the progress of the war in Iran. Secretary of State Marco Rubio insists it will be over in weeks, not months, without the need for ground troops. President Trump says the remaining 3,500 targets left will be done pretty quickly. And this morning, the war seems to have pulled in Yemen as well, with the Houthi rebels there firing a missile at Israel. So as reports emerge of at least 12 US troops wounded after an Iranian attack on a base in Saudi Arabia, how strong is America's position? Harrison Mann is a former US Army major and ex-US Defense Intelligence Agency analyst. Let me start here, actually, Harrison, if I may, that 12 US troops have been injured in a strike by Iran on an airbase in Saudi Arabia. Actually, first of all, are you familiar with that airbase? What's it like? Where is it?
I have not been there myself, but I can tell you, having served in several bases around the Gulf, mainly in Bahrain and Kuwait, and having visited several others, these are not fortresses. Right, these are not designed to absorb fire. There may be bunkers or certain hardened structures, but they're mostly sprawling complexes with a lot of offices and lodgings being tents or trailers, essentially. But this base is basically in the middle of Saudi Arabia, and gives you an idea of the range of the weapons Iran's using.
Yeah, and that is so helpful to understand and to put into context. What does it represent, I suppose, that 12 troops have been injured, 2 of them seriously, not the first casualties, US casualties of this conflict, but additional casualties, certainly?
This war has been a bad idea, executed badly. And so, in addition to the strategic fallacies here, we've seen the administration put troops in harm's way, really with none of the rudimentary protections you would want to keep them safe if you're going up against an adversary whose main strategic capabilities are missiles and drones. You may have seen Task and Purpose reported today or yesterday that the Pentagon just put out like an emergency solicitation for bunkers, for prefab bunkers, within 3, 15, and 30 days. It's clear that they did not expect the war to go on this long, or if they did, they just really didn't think in advance how vulnerable U.S. troops are. And I think this ties also into the discussion of sending more ground troops into the region. That hitting this base and specifically hitting refueler aircraft shows the level of precision that Iran can strike with sometimes. It was a choice to hit these aircraft. It's something that's going to inhibit basically the entire air campaign, U.S. and Israeli air campaign, the more of these that you destroy. But you have to understand, if they can hit these planes on the tarmac, they can also hit the barracks, where we might be sending thousands of troops to stay in, which would be an additional concern about employing more ground forces.
Yeah, and that is actually a fascinating point to just focus on with you, Harrison, because from what you've said about these Gulf bases that are not fortresses, and Iran demonstrating its capability, should that lead to the Pentagon, the US administration, President Trump, frankly, thinking twice about the deployment of troops, additional troops, thousands of troops to the area?
It should. I think we can already see how vulnerable U.S. troops are just in bases that are sometimes hundreds of miles away from Iran and defended by the most sophisticated air defense systems in human history, right? That's what these strikes at Prince Sultan Air Base or these other bases in the Gulf are penetrating. And that should give you an idea about how much risk U.S. troops would be exposed to if we actually sent them onto Iranian territory, where they're not going to enjoy any advanced warning system. They're not going to enjoy THAADs and Patriots and other advanced air defense systems. They'll be entirely at the mercy of whatever Iran can fire at them. I think a lot of times in these leaks to Axios, the administration is doing to telegraph or threaten these ground operations. It's really like they're playing with action figures and they're imagining they're going to go to these places and there's no enemy there. or there's no targets already registered on these islands or on these nuclear sites or wherever they're speculating they're going to send troops.
So then we turn to what Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said, that the war will be over in weeks, not months. How likely do you think that is to be correct?
It could come true if the administration commits to good faith negotiations with Tehran right now. That's not what's going to happen.
Capitulate. That's what he's saying.
If
the United States is going to
playing games, stop using negotiations as a cover to maneuver forces, stop putting forth conditions that they know Iran is never going to accept, you maybe actually could come to a resolution in that period. But I don't think that's what's happening. I think this was his attempt to reassure both domestic audiences this war is deeply unpopular in the U.S., even among some segments of Republicans, and possibly trying to reassure Gulf allies as some are starting to peel off and maybe looking at making their own bilateral deals with Iran to try and stay out of the crossfire of this war.
Just as a kind of final consideration, Harrison, when you review how tactically the US and Israel has approached this conflict over the last month, has it made sense to you how they have militarily gone about this, the targets that have been chosen, and I suppose crucially within that, the targets which have not been chosen? There's been a lot of talk in the last few weeks around Karg Island, for example. Should that have been a higher priority in order to exert some level of dominance over Iran at an earlier stage? What's your assessment of the kind of tactical approach here?
So there's a divergence in goals in Tel Aviv and DC. I think Israel is quite content to wage a war of annihilation against Iran. They basically want to wipe it off the map as a potential future threat forever. So in that case, killing all the leadership, destroying all the infrastructure, including oil, turning into a fractured or collapsed state would be mission accomplished. On the U.S. side, we've seen the Trump administration is horrified about raising gas prices in the U.S. any higher. And so they've not only abstained from striking targets like Karg Island, which exports 90% of Iran's oil, they've tried to rein in Israel when it went after oil and gas infrastructure. But the thing is, they don't really know what to strike. Decapitation strikes did not collapse the regime. Destroying easy-to-hit things like airplanes on the tarmac or like Iranian Navy ships did not diminish Iran's main strategic capabilities, and it's still keeping up a consistent rate of fire with drones and missiles across the region. So I hesitate to even say that the U.S. has been tactically successful, and it really doesn't matter how good your tactics are if you have no strategy. And when Iran did not turn out like Venezuela after the first 12 hours, I don't think Trump and the folks around him, other than those who just want to totally turn it into Libya or Syria and collapse it, had any idea of what they were attacking for. We can go more into Karg Island if we have time to talk about the ground operations they keep threatening there, which I think would be a strategic and a tactical disaster, like a lot of the ground operations under consideration. I just have to start by saying the strategic logic makes no sense. The U.S. and Israel are already trying to assassinate every Iranian leader and basically threatening to destroy the country. So taking their oil revenue is not going to be a greater pressure tactic than what's already happening. So the idea that this provides infinite leverage is a fantasy, and I think it's a fantasy designed to appeal to Donald Trump's conception of deal making, and if I can just get the right leverage, I can win this war. But what it would look like would be putting 1,000+ U.S. troops on a small island that's nearly impossible to not only to reinforce or resupply, but to get troops back out of. This island is 15 miles off the coast of Iran, which means you're not just in the range of missiles and drones, but also conventional, very rudimentary, more primitive weapons Iran hasn't gotten the chance to use yet, right? Rockets and artillery, technology from nearly 100 years ago. Add to that the amount of telegraphing and announcing that they've done about this attack. Yeah, of course, the Iranian military is going to mine the island and set up new defensive positions and pre-planned targets. And I just lastly have to add about this specific island. Once U.S. troops take this oil terminal and this oil facility, it's not any good to Tehran anymore. So I don't know why they wouldn't just blow it up as soon as U.S. troops are there, causing a horrific mass casualty event. And then, like I talk about, like, we have to think about what it means to try and move hundreds or thousands of troops out of Iranian territory. That's landing dozens of helicopters at a time. That's a really easy target, unfortunately. So I cannot overstate how much this island or the other ones that the Trump administration is talking about trying to capture would be a death trap for U.S. troops. And I just really don't want to see that happen. And I think it's so dangerous the way they discuss taking these islands, like the little empty points on a map, and not within range of extremely deadly series of weapon systems.
I'm sure General Kane has thought about this. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex will help with your cellular metabolism, help to protect your neurons, and boost up your energy levels. Resveratrol, it's a youthful gene. It helps with youthful gene expression. It also helps to get rid of cells that need to be purged. You have cells that start to build up within your tissues. They stop dividing. That's called senescence. And once they are in this phase, they just collect garbage. You need to get rid of them. So resveratrol helps with the apoptosis of senescent cells. And resveratrol helps the health of your mitochondria so you have more energy and it soaks up free radicals. This will help the basal layer of your skin so you'll look younger. So you should be taking resveratrol every day to slow down the aging process. It stacks really well with C60. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin B complex that boosts up your energy, revs up your metabolism, and protects your neurons. And resveratrol slows down the aging process and helps to rejuvenate certain types of tissue within your body. Stack them together. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now, the next video is from DW that's talking about Saudi Arabia urges U.S. to press on with the Iran war. This was published 9 hours ago.
Leader Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has reportedly been urging President Trump to continue the war against Iran. That's according to the New York Times, citing people briefed by U.S. officials. The report says Prince Mohammed argued that the U.S.-Israeli military campaign presented what he called a historic opportunity to remake the Middle East, and that Iran's government should be pushed toward collapse. Saudi officials denied that account, saying the kingdom supports a peaceful resolution and is focused on defending itself from Iranian attacks. The report comes as Iranian strikes have hit Saudi oil infrastructure, raising concerns about the economic and security risks of a prolonged conflict. Let's bring in Mirzad Bourjerdi. He's the vice provost at Missouri University of Science and Technology and a leading scholar of Iranian politics and foreign policy. Mirzad, welcome to the day. It's great to have you on the show. Let's start with the basics here. Why would Saudi Arabia be interested in the U.S. ramping up attacks on Iran?
Let's bring in. Well, as we know, these two countries have been arch rivals since the 1979 revolution. Back in 2008, King Abdullah, who was the current crown prince's paternal uncle, he was reported to have told the American political establishment to cut off the head of the snake, referring to, of course, to the Iranian government. The two countries, forged a rapprochement in 2023, thanks to the efforts of the Chinese, but this conflict really has not gone anywhere. Saudi Arabia has been urging the U.S. to ramp up attacks on Iran as they are coming under attack from Iranian drones. And we remember back in 2019, an Iranian missile attack on Saudi oil facilities really caused major damage for the Saudis. So it seems to me that they are seeing a repeat of that scenario. And based on the principle of rent a superpower, the idea is that you allow the U.S. to do the dirty work for you.
What would a new regional order to MBS's liking look like if he really sees this as a historic opportunity?
Well, imagine for the Saudis, if they do not have to deal with an arch rival like Iran that has tried to undermine their policies in neighboring states such as Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Gaza, etc. This really presents MBS with an opportunity to try to increase Saudi Arabia's influence throughout the Middle East.
How do you think the war and the way it's being conducted are being perceived by Saudi leadership, though?
Well, I think, no love is lost, right, for Iran in Riyadh. And of course, seeing the Iran having its nose bloodied is welcome news in Riyadh. But, apparently from what we are hearing is that, this is not enough. What they are asking is really encouraging the United States to use ground forces to try to topple the regime, which is, a position that is very close to that of the, Israelis in terms of, getting rid of the Islamic Republic as a whole.
Yeah, but things as they stand right now, there's chaos in the region. There's no clear exit strategy. How does Riyadh feel about that?
Yeah, so I think, they are, of course, also worried about, the possible scenario of Iran becoming, a failed state next door to them. That is not a pleasant scenario for them either. Why? Because A, you're talking about a vast country of 92 million people. So you can imagine the flood of refugees that is going to go, in every direction. You can imagine the political chaos. Keep in mind that 10 to 15% of the entire population of Saudi Arabia are Shiites that are concentrated in the eastern part of the country. And of course, Iran can cause mischief among the Shiite population of Saudi Arabia if there is a conflict between the two states. Furthermore, imagine again if all the gloves come out, right? How Iran can try to reverse and undermine some of the political successes that the Saudis have managed to gain over the last few years in places like Syria or Iraq. Furthermore, the Saudis are also worried about another remaining a wild card in this whole conflict, and that is the entry of the Houthis into this conflict, for which they have been involved, as we know, in a war since 2015. Things have died down a bit, over the last few years, but there is always the possibility, and we are beginning to see such threats being articulated by the Houthi leadership that, we can get involved in this conflict as well.
Yeah, so a lot to be nervous about on the part of MBS. How does this position in that regard differ from the position held in Israel, especially when it comes to the prospect of Iran possibly becoming a failed state?
Right. So I think for the Israelis, a failed state in Iran actually it might be a good outcome, a good scenario for them. They are further away from Iran. They consider Iran as an existential threat, etc., and therefore, disintegration of Iran or a regime change is the ultimate scenario that I think Mr. Netanyahu is pursuing. For the Saudis, being geographically closer to Iran, and as I said already, the danger of a failed state in Iran is worrisome to them. Keep in mind again that much of the Saudi wealth is generated by shipping oil right through the Persian Gulf, etc., and therefore a political chaos in Iran can come back to hit them in their pocketbooks.
You said that there was an approach of rent a superpower. Does that go both ways? Does the U.S. maybe also have an approach of rent a monarch? Because Donald Trump has called MBS a warrior and said that he is fighting with us. I'm quoting him here. Any idea what he means by that?
Well, I think what he's really referring to is that, again, based on the reporting you're seeing, apparently MBS behind the scene is really quite gung-ho and encouraging, Trump to go on here. Yes, absolutely. I think this is a dialectical relationship between the two. We know that, it has been a Saudi policy to open up their, pocketbooks and try to appease the White House of Mr. Trump by, financing various projects in the United States, etc., buying billions of dollars of armaments from the United States in this regard. So the Saudis use that card for leverage as best as they can. But look, they are also in this awkward position, meaning that, for the longest time, not just the Saudis, but all the smaller states of the Persian Gulf, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, etc., they have all counted on this protection of a US military umbrella, right? But now we are beginning to see that this defensive umbrella is not really what it was, portrayed to be. This war already has impacted 14 different countries in the region. And therefore, the question now is, that once the guns fall silent, right, the question is, what is going to best secure the security of these states for the long term? Yeah. And it seems to me that they do not have too many patrons besides the United States to back them up.
Yeah, and I have one last question to you because, the Saudis' reputation, security, and economy is at stake here. Briefly, if you can, do you see them getting directly involved at some stage?
Yes.
As of right now, I don't think so.
No,
as I said, I think the prospect of Houthis entering the war is troublesome for them. And, if the reporting that we are hearing is correct, and again, Secretary Rubio today...
If the Houthis block the strait in the Red Sea, all right, Ba'ab el-Mandab, I think it's called, the Saudis are going to have to help with the U.S. to knock out Yemen.
Talking about this war lasting weeks rather than months, right? So the Saudis have to be worried about President Trump declaring victory and leaving, right? And if they get involved in this war, next door neighbor, physically is not going to go away, and they have to deal with the challenge of Iran for years and years to come.
Mirzad Boujardi, Vice Provost at Missouri University of Science and Technology.
This is the reason why. This is the reason why it's so important to make sure that the IRGC is destroyed and the theocratic regime can never rise up again in Iran, and that the seculars within Iran build a new government that's a constitutional republic. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the C60. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration. You can get it in extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT coconut oil. C60 has to be the molecule C60, which is 60 carbons, have to be suspended in oil for proper absorption. Take a teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach, for best absorption, but take it every day, a teaspoon a day. And what you will notice is that your energy levels will improve. You're going to improve your cardiovascular health, your brain function, your immune system, and your endocrine system. Why? By soaking up free radicals at the vascular level, you're reducing plaque formation. At the neuron level, you're reducing stress, you're reducing inflammation, you're soaking up free radicals, you're improving the health of the mitochondria within the neurons. They're going to be healthier, so they're going to fold proteins properly. They're going to be producing neurotransmitters and improving the positive neuroplasticity, so you have more dendritic connections, so you're going to be thinking better. You're going to be having better memory over time. And your immune system and your endocrine system improves. This is 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C in terms of free radicals, soaking up free radicals, right? 1,000 times stronger to soak up free radicals than vitamin C. You can't take enough vitamin C to get the same benefits. Take a teaspoon a day every day. You'll also notice that you'll recover quicker after a workout because it's soaking up those free radicals. So get the C60, take a teaspoon a day every day. I've been doing this protocol for 10 years. Every day, teaspoon a day. It will also improve your basal layer. And by improving your basal layer for your skin will improve and you will look younger. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the C60. All right, let's listen into Times Radio about physical oil shortages within 2 to 3 weeks, says energy expert. This was produced 2 days ago.
On this, as we dig into what we should be doing. We talked about the politics of what we saw today, but let's see what Nick Butler, former Vice President for Strategy and Policy at BP, and Gordon Brown advisor, has to say about this. Nick, the situation is this, as I'm sure you're aware, Rosebank and Jackdaw, 2 fossil fuel sites in the North Sea, they had been approved, licenses had been given, they were then halted, and the situation's in legal limbo because it is unsure what environmental impacts will be had as a result of drilling at these particular sites. And because it's on hold, by process of the way the Labour government's instructed on this, they'd have to reapply for licences again, come whatever may. So the whole thing is on hold, having been approved. Does it make sense to you that this remains on hold? Is this insignificant enough to not really be the answer for the situation, the energy crisis at the moment?
Well, good evening. I thought the session at lunchtime, which I watched on TV, was really depressing. It's just 6 years ago since we went into the COVID pandemic, and I remember the weeks before that when we kept being told there wasn't really a problem. It might affect other people, it might affect the Chinese or Italians, and too little was done until too late, as the inquiry is showing. I think that's what's happening now. There is a crisis coming. I think within the next 2 to 3 weeks, you will see physical shortages. That's been confirmed, I think, this week by Shell. I don't know whether they'll affect us in the UK. Maybe we'll pay for all the oil and gas at whatever price, but I think it's quite possible there will be shortages. And I think the government now should be seriously planning how they're going to handle that. And part of that is maximising supply. Now, I understand the Prime Minister's legal point, but I understand that this assessment has been completed, but hasn't yet been called in by the department for Ed Miliband to take the decision. I think it should be called in tomorrow. And I think we need to see what that assessment says. I think it'll say that it's fine to go ahead, and then work on it can continue. And the companies involved have put a lot of money and effort into doing that. It won't change the whole crisis situation, but it will help. And this won't be the last war in the Middle East, the last interruption to supply. So developing the North Sea to the extent of the reserves that are there, that's at least 3 or 4 million barrels of billion barrels of oil and gas, and another 10 to 12 of resources that could possibly be developed. I think we are going to need that, and the government should have a sense of urgency in getting the industry going again. At the moment, it's in decline. There's a real unemployment problem in Aberdeen and other parts of Scotland. And I was just so disappointed by the lack of urgency from the Prime Minister.
Isn't the problem a political one, that were Labour the government to change their position on this, it would almost certainly be breaking something they said in their manifesto, and it would be a massive humiliation for the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband?
Well, I think maybe that's true, but given the circumstances, you have to say sometimes that whatever you hoped to do in the manifesto was not appropriate for events that have taken place. And I think that's the case we're in now. We are still going to need oil and gas. So if the North Sea isn't developed, if Rosebank and Jackdaw are not developed, we'll be importing. We're not going to suddenly stop using oil and gas. I mean, 96% of all cars and light vehicles run on petrol and diesel. Electric vehicles, only 4%. Those cars are going to have to run on something, and they will be importing, they'll rely on imported oil and gas. And I think I can see no economic logic in going ahead with the closing down of the North Sea.
The oil majors, including BP that you once worked for, have, as I understand it, stopped their operations in the North Sea and handed over to others. So, I mean, how significant do you think for the British economy is what remains under the North Sea?
Well, as I said, there are serious volumes there. It won't change the world, but I think we need all the volumes we can get. And I don't think there's any case for closing down an industry before it has to close down, when the only alternative is imports. If you talk to the trade unions or the business world, they find this decision and the Prime Minister's implicit support for this decision inexplicable and irrational.
I spoke to Joe Powell, the Labour MP, a few moments ago, and he seemed to say the issue is that even if you did, for example, get the Jackdaw gas field up and running, that you still have to pay the worldwide price for gas. That it was problematic because it wouldn't actually cost us any less. We'd still be operating off a worldwide gas price.
Yes, we will be operating off a worldwide gas price, but because it's our own oil and gas, I think that gives us a degree of security, plus the benefits of the jobs involved in further development, and the benefit of the tax revenue to the Exchequer, which would come if these developments continue. So the economic logic for the current policy is not substantiated.
Nick, do you think there's a case for cutting the tax on North Sea oil exploration, which has also been called for?
I do actually. I think the tax system, which past governments, including past Labour governments, have adjusted in order to maximise.
Also, by developing the North Sea, that allows for the UK to have energy reserves, have energy flows to conduct a world war. We're moving into a world war here, guys. World War III already started in 2022. And it's going to end in Asia. Now the question is who's going to win?
Supplies at different times should be the priority now. I think the very high tax system has deterred some investors. I think we should be trying to attract them back. This is a matter of urgency about security of supply, and everything should be done to maximise that supply. And then, of course, the tax system will catch the benefits to the companies over time.
Yeah, because
the more production you have, the more taxes you'll get in the future.
And a big question, I mean, Ed Miliband and others seem to feel that if we do exploit the North Sea more, it will somehow slow down the UK's journey towards renewables. Do you think that's fair?
No, we need them all. We need wind and solar and nuclear, but I don't think you can do those until, as you mentioned to your last interviewee, until the grid is ready to receive them all. And the nuclear program is way behind schedule. For the moment, we use every day 75–80% of all the energy we use comes from oil and gas. That is where the key security of supply issue rests. And you can't substitute that very quickly by new renewables. It takes time. Our system is not ready for all those new renewables yet. And renewables only produce electricity.
And renewables don't have the energy density that oil and gas have. Really important. Now, this whole thing that's going on in the Middle East and the world is in here. The New Map by Daniel Yergin. He's an expert in energy markets. He wrote other books about energy that I read, The Prize and the Quest. There is a great documentary for free on YouTube. I think it's 10 or 11 videos, I think about an hour long, on the Quest, talking, or on the Prize. It's the documentary on the Prize. And that's the whole oil industry, how it started, and the geopolitics involved. The Quest is a similar book. The New Map. This talks about the geopolitics of oil for the United States, for Russia, and for China. All right? And how the Middle East is part of this big picture here. So I highly recommend that you read this book. Super important, all right, to understand what's going on in the world. All right, I'm a little bit more than halfway done, but I think I'm in the area where it's China. I finished Russia, the map of Russia, and I'm in the area, yeah, the South China Sea, talking about that. But the point here is that you need to get educated about oil. You need to get educated about where the pipelines are, where the shipping lanes are, where are the reserves. You know, it's concentrated in certain regions of the world. And these are really important. So before we continue with Times Radio, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen will help to rebuild your cartilage. It helps to rebuild the joint overall by building up that cartilage and building up the cushion. Now, what it does is it helps to use collagen type 2 and glucosamine to help build up the cartilage. It also helps to use acan and chondroitin to cushion the joint. This will help to reduce the erosion of the joint by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. And collagen helps to reduce the pain by blocking EP4. Take this every day. Do a little bit of working that joint out. You know, you get to a point where it's up to a certain pain level, and then you go a little bit more, and then you exercise that joint a little bit, maybe 20 reps, and then do that once or twice a day. And eventually you'll be able to open up the joint and your joint is remodeling. All right. You can stack this with the collagen to help rebuild the joint. And you can take the collagen and the super strong relief and stack them together. Now, what does super strong, you can take it separately, but what does super strong relief do? It actually reduces the pain or eliminates the pain, depending on your pain level. It also helps with headaches, to reduce tension headaches. So you just apply it on for a headache, you apply it on your temples, your forehead, and your neck muscles and your shoulder muscles to reduce that tension headache. If you have a sore muscle after working out or a pulled muscle, apply it to that area. It'll help to reduce the pain. And if you have joint pain from a sport or through arthritis, apply this in that area. It's a topical. It's easy to use. It works within 90 seconds. All right. You can use it together, all right, or separately. But if you have pain in the joint, apply this topically and take the collagen. And over time, you're going to be rebuilding the joint. Now, you want to do this right away. Once you start having pain, once you start having problems with your arthritis, the earlier you start, the better. Because over time, if you wait too long, too much of that cartilage would erode, and you may need surgery after. All right? But you want to catch it early. All right? So please, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen, get the collagen, and also the super strong relief. Very high quality products. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, save some money, use discount 5, use it on any order, all caps, discount the number 5, and you get $5 off.
So we need I think we need a full review of energy policy to get it back on track.
It seems like Ed Miliband will be the only person in charge of that. Just touching on something you said earlier, Nick, you talked about shortages. Last week or 10 days or so ago, you said the UK should brace for fuel rationing over the Iran war. Do you still believe that that's the case?
Yes, I think we're not there yet. There's no shortage yet. There's no need for panic buying at the moment. But if you go another couple of weeks with almost nothing coming out through the Straits of Hormuz, you're losing, say, 20%, just under 20% of global oil supply. Someone is going to get less supply. And I think some of that will come to us, some of that pain. And also we're going to face world prices that have gone up quite dramatically, and they could go up further. I don't see a quick end to the war. And therefore, the government has to think through how they're going to handle this situation if the war continues, which is a problem. And then, I mean, we went through this, and Adam will remember the tanker drivers dispute in 2000. Then you realize that energy is so crucial to the whole of the economy. You have to protect certain sectors. The food supply system, the hospitals, the schools, and government has to be responsible for that. So that takes some of the available supply and dedicates it to them. And that's right. But then you have to think, and I think the Treasury, from their comments yesterday, are seriously beginning to think about what you would do with the rest. And protecting the lowest income people is one option, but I think you also have to protect business. There's no energy cap on business, and they will really suffer if these prices persist.
So just painting the picture on fuel rationing and what that would look like, you say that in a couple of weeks' time, we are likely still, in your opinion, to see shortage affect our market here, which will mean
if the straits remain closed for all the way through April, the world is going to go into recession. And investors in the United States have already started hitting the panic button and selling equities. Now, don't panic, buy into the S&P 500. But we are going to probably test the 6,000 S&P 500 if this doesn't de-escalate within 2 weeks.
What would that look like, do you think, if we were to explain how fuel rationing would work, or what the options would be for government on that?
Well, I think the first option is to protect the supplies to the key sectors. The sectors we all depend on all the time. And that will take quite a serious effort and quite a lot of the available supply. Then I don't think this is about rationing cards or anything like that. If you look around the world, people are thinking about 4-day weeks, about specific measures to discourage particular use, emergency action to improve efficiency, those sort of things. And I think what would be good now is for the government to set out a plan of how they're going to do this if we get into this worst case situation, which is quite close. We're not there yet. And I think they need to reassure people that they have a plan, that it makes sense, and that it's fair.
Yeah. Look, thank you for speaking to us and for setting.
It could get a lot worse. It all depends on this next 14 days, what's going to happen. And when we, do some ground troop operations on the islands or maybe on the mainland, maybe a little bit in Yemen, who knows? It can get out of hand and there's going to be a global recession. Now, I keep on saying to everybody, depending on how this goes, depending on how mankind figures a way out of this problem, depends on if we're going to be getting a curse on September 11th, 2026. That's going to be an inflection point. That's the fork in the road. And if we choose the wrong path and we get cursed, that curse is going to continue on and get worse for the world, going all the way through the rest of this year into next year, 2027, to the beginning of October. So from September 11th, 2026 to the first or second week of October of 2027. So this world is getting judged right now. It's watching and it's judging. And the actual punishment, the degree of punishment, will be instituted on September 11th, 2026. And I've been saying this for 2.5 years. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the supplements that you need to slow down the aging process and boost up that immune system. You're going to need to boost up that immune system. Bad things are coming. And don't freak out when you start seeing your 401k or your investments starting to sell off. Don't panic. Continue to buy. and just view this long term. The S&P 500, don't bet against the United States. We will find a way. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.